And you are listening to a live broadcast of the G20 Leaders Summit out here in Nazareth as the G20 leaders convene to talk about the nuts and bolts of what will be in that declaration, if there's going to be a declaration, and we'll see if there is true consensus. President Cyril Ramaphosa, in his opening address, calling for unity and solidarity. We see President Macron now addressing the summit, and we will be looking at insights into what might possibly be stickler points, if there are some. Peter, we're joined by Dr. Lebohang Pheko, who's also going to share her insights on what's been happening.
So good to talk to you. Good to see you.
You too.
G20.
Yeah.
What does it mean for Africa right now? Is it another game-changing? Not by any stretch of the imagination.
No, I mean, I think the one thing that's really useful and interesting about it is that, as we know, it's the fourth consecutive G20 that's taking place in the majority world, and we are feeding off the momentum of India, Indonesia and Brazil. And what the Brazilian agenda particularly did was to shift the needle even further away from the two mainstays previously of the G20, which were basically, debt and crisis management. Those were basically it. Now we talk about development. Now we talk about climate change. Now we talk about intellectual property. Now we talk about labor rights. Now we talk about a whole host of social inequality, poverty. This was not language that really was there, when earlier on in the G20's incarnation. So that's useful. But whether we can call it changing, bit generous.
Yeah. So I had a conversation with Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala just a couple of days ago. And she said something interesting to me, almost to suggest, let's not push too hard right now. Rather go through this and then see where we can go. And I'm wondering if her experience at the WTO, understanding how these powers work, that maybe there are steps that we need to take for the African agenda. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that these institutions, the Bretton Woods institutions, are inherently not built and designed with us in mind, like most multilateral institutions. The power and the voice and the origins of them are very much centered within a Euro-US framing. So remember that even the IMF, the World Bank, these were built and developed to recover from their own world wars, right? And then even similarly, the G7 in the 1970s was also created to rescue from the oil crisis at the time, which also then led to the linking of the US dollar to oil prices, and that's a legacy of the dollarization and the financialization of global economics that all of us are living in the afterlife of. So none of these institutions, Peter and Tsepi, have really ever had the inclination to be inclusive, to be truly diverse, and to be truly representative of African country interests. I've always been of the view that in as much as it's polite democracy or polite diplomacy to attend, to participate, we really shouldn't think that these are where we're going to be able to resolve, to build, to reconstruct our own economic, political, democratic architecture.
And just following on that train of thought, Dr. Pheko, so if they're not designed to, and we're talking about economic reform in dealing with injustices, particularly in the African continent. So what is the likelihood, also given the informal nature of the G20 and the real power asymmetries, how much of this is going to be rhetoric at the end of?
I don't have much faith. I mean, I think people who sort of may have heard me speak before and follow some of my writing, I've really never had faith in these sorts of institutions. I've been a skeptic and a critic of the WTO, of the IMF, of the World Bank, even though I follow the conversations very carefully, and similarly a skeptic of the G20. What sets the G20 apart to a lesser extent is that it is, even though it's non-binding, it also doesn't have the veto mechanisms, which means that minority country, which the the IMF and the World Bank do, where minority countries, i.e., population minorities of Europe and the US, are able to veto, and really go against the aspirations of a global majority. The G20 at least offers much greater fluidity, flexibility, and of course, consensus building. But then, of course, it's non-binding, and of course, it also lives in the afterlife of the G7, where we are also at this table by the invitation of the original 7 countries. So, look, it has its merits as a discussion as a place and a forum of discussion and of stating our own aspirations, but it is not the place to build African futures and African imaginations. No.
I suppose it's a double-edged sword, though, the informality, because
Absolutely.
in the end, people can renege on their promises.
Absolutely.
And so
Yeah.
how does Africa deal with that then?
I think that we really ought to be focusing our energy. As I say, this is polite diplomacy, it's fine, but we need to be focusing on our own institutions. I've always been of that view. We have a moribund African Union, which has now slightly muddied the waters by then joining as an observer per se of the G20, so kind of G21, I suppose. We also have a very moribund, SADC, our regional economic formations are not really functioning to full capacity, and yet on paper, like so many things about us, they have excellent, progressive, and in some ways very avant-garde trade policy, industrial architecture.
So I'm just want to jump in there. I'm sorry, Tsepiso. What would a G54 for Africa look like if we did it properly?
A G4, as in for the continent.
Yes.
I mean, isn't that what the African Union really ought to be? Do we need to, burn down that the Chinese-sponsored building, and then recreate something else?
Yeah.
Are there ways in which we can really draw on the good lessons? I mean, the Sherpa track within the G20 is really interesting, because that's where the technocrats do all the work. And it has got some influence. The finance track. What needs to happen is that we also need to make sure that the other tracks, and the other engagement groups, like your Think 20, your Think Tank 20, which I've been a part of, your Youth 20, your Science 20, which is becoming incredibly influential. Perhaps we could use some of those modalities to reframe and reimagine what a much more productive and a much more forward-thinking institution of an African Union could look like, because it's so displaced and so far away from, dispersed from most African people. It's a place somewhere in Addis. If you ask the average person, they might not even know where exactly it is situated, and that's a damning indictment. We also are a host of the Pan-African Parliament. Do we need more institutions? As for the Pan-African Parliament, it's so very much, it's extremely incoherent. It doesn't even cohere with the African Union. It's in fact in competition with, and often at odds with, hardly any overlaps in terms of pronouncements, strategic direction. So I'm not sure whether building new institutions, building more Gs or anything is the way to go. Perhaps we need to think of a project of reclamation of existing institutions, and at the very least, an audit of why they're not effective. And also, what is it that African people want? How do we want to be represented? What are the sorts of issues that we are most interested in? And what are the kind of institutions that will match those aspirations?
So would you bring it down to institutional misalignment, do you think?
A bit more than that. I think it's the politics of them, because also the challenge with a lot of these with a lot of the current formations, including the BRICS, is that they've basically taken the IMF, the Bretton Woods, the very market-driven, market-orthodox, some would say neoliberal template, and just pasted it on these processes. So you're not getting anything new. At the beginning of when South Africa was joining the BRICS, I was part of a few of these sorts of think tanky discussions. And I said at the time, and I've been saying it since, is it better for, if capitalism, if market-led financialization takes place, is it better if it happens with a tan? Is capitalism with a tan better because now we're calling it BRICS? Is it really something that is a radical departure from everything that we've been doing? And I think the template essentially is very conservative. It's very tame, it's very domesticated, and it's very fearful frankly, of offending, the Western hegemony, disturbing it. And I think I would slightly disagree with Dr. Ngozi's perspective, and I understand that she's certainly sitting inside the burning cauldrons. But this kind of gradualist approach, gradual until when?
Yeah, I'm just curious about our own ability to do what we need to do. We talk about changing the infrastructure of financial architectures, and yet it costs more to trade within Africa than
absolutely
beyond. I don't get that.
None of us get that. None of us do. And I think that's a failure of our own. I think it's it does boil down to political will, political prioritization. Look how easy and how easily and efficiently a setup like this, to get Johannesburg looking beautiful, to get the roads fixed, to get potholes. I don't want to focus too much on that, especially for our global audience, but to get things looking pretty, functioning well. So the capacity is there. So the question is, where is the gap between the capacity and the urgency? And that could cut across many other dimensions. My other concern is that the cost of even running events like this, hosting fora like this, which could instead be distributed and allocated and directed towards the kind of the priorities that we all are well aware of. Some of our energy, the energy shedding challenges that we have, some of the challenges that we have in our public health system, the 2 billion rand Tembisa Hospital. I won't say more about that. That's resolving many more of those issues. I wonder whether our cost-benefit analysis is really giving us a really good return on that kind of investment. Can we reshape and rethink what would be a useful return on investment and investment in our energy and the immense talent that we have on the continent? I've always said that, South Africa included, we have some of the best technocrats in the world, and I'll say that with my full chest. We've got excellent technocrats. It makes your heart sing. Things do function, things do work. You do get your taxes sorted out by some faceless technocrats. You do get your ID documents. Even your passport comes back. It takes me 2 weeks, my passport is renewed. Things do function, and we don't focus enough on that. We have one of the largest feeding schemes in the world. We have 8 million children every day in this country from abject, indigent circumstances, socioeconomic circumstances, who are getting fed, and that is having some impact on learning outcomes and so on. So that there are these, and I don't want to say this in this cheesy good news way, but they are impactful, meaningful, diligent public servants who are doing incredible work. Can we not leverage on that technocratic capacity, enhance it, enlarge it, scale it up, as it were? Can we not use those sorts of models of excellent practice within our context to begin to think, well, how then do we translate this to doing this at SADC level, at East Africa level, at West Africa level, and then how do they eventually come together?
Sadly, we always run out of time in these kinds of scenarios, but Dr. Pheko, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much, Peter, for your insights and your thoughts.
Appreciate it.
And that's how we come to the end of this live broadcast. Day 2, the final day tomorrow coming up, and we will still be here bringing you the latest developments. And of course, that's when we'll really get to see whether South Africa's leadership of the G20 is one that will reshape global economics, or is it still a case of
keep our fingers crossed,
the old story, old powers reasserting their bias against Africa?
Thanks, everybody. The news is next. And it's,
you celebrate. This is Africa Chart Toppers with Ndoro Makwetla, Africa's hottest sounds, all in one place on Channel Africa. Available on the Channel Africa app. This weekend, South Africa will host the G20 summit at the Nasrec Expo Center near Soweto. And Channel Africa will be right there to bring you live updates, interviews, and real-time insights from the main venue. And so, our regular lineup will be adjusted just a little bit for this weekend to accommodate the G20. On Saturday, the 22nd of November, the Oasis will broadcast for 2 hours. Out and About takes a break for a full look at the G20. After Africa Chart Toppers, our news and current affairs team will bring you special live broadcast in 5 different languages directly from Nasrec. And normal programming will resume at 8 p.m. Central African Time. And then on Sunday, the 23rd of November, the Oasis will also broadcast for 2 hours. Tech Africa steps aside for our news and current affairs teams to bring you special live broadcast in 5 different languages. Then, Planting the Seed resumes from 1 p.m. till 2 p.m. Central African Time. Channel Africa, your window to the continent, connecting you to the world in an African perspective.
All right, listen up.
The beats you love, the artists you celebrate. This is Africa Chart Toppers with Ndoro and Tsepiso, Africa's hottest sounds, all in one place on Channel Africa. Available on the Channel Africa app.